This is Delhi. Please stand by for our next program. This is All India Radio. In commemoration of Hindi Divas, which is observed every year on 14th September, in our national program tonight, we bring you our eminential dialogue entitled In Hindi Service, Father Camille Bulcke. The participants are Professor Ananya Bose, Assistant Professor, Department of English, St. Xavier's College, Ranchi, and Professor Sachindranath Mishra, Assistant Professor, Department of English, St. Xavier's College, Ranchi.
गांधी जी चाहते थे हिंदी राष्ट्र भाषा बनाना, तो उन्होंने शिकायत की जिन प्रांतों की मातृभाषा हिंदी है वहां हिंदी के लिए कोई खास रुचि दिखाई नहीं देती है। और मेरा दृढ़ विश्वास है कि हिंदी की प्रगति इसलिए नहीं हो पाती है कि हिंदी प्रांत में लोग हिंदी की प्रगति के बारे में नहीं सोचते हैं। जब तक उत्तर भारत में हिंदी प्रतिष्ठित नहीं है तब हम आशा नहीं कर सकते हैं कि दूसरे प्रांतों में ये लोग हिंदी को महत्व दें। हिंदी ही ऐसी भाषा है जो समस्त भारतीय संस्कृति की कुंजी है। ऐसी कोई प्राचीन रचना नहीं है जिसका हिंदी में अनुवाद नहीं है।
We consider it a matter of immense privilege and honor to have been invited to discuss a man who transcends the boundaries of mortal years and glory. Padma Bhushan, Dr. Father Camille Bulcke, a saint, a devotee of the highest order, serving languages, literature, the common man and the Almighty alike, has made a place for himself in the hearts of millions who had the opportunity to see him and even those who get to know about him. It is a matter of great joy for me to share the platform today with Professor Sachin Mishra to discuss someone whom our college takes pride in. We come from the college same as Dr. Father Bulcke's, and the joy of being associated with an institution as prestigious as this never dies down.
Indeed, he was not just a lover of Hindi, but also an ardent lover of humanity.
It is true. His very childhood had subjected him to the softest, the strongest, and the best. And all these experiences influenced him to become the man the world knows him as. Father Bulcke himself said that he had inherited his father's strong build and drive, his mother's soft-heartedness and love for service, and both his parents' love for religion.
Besides this, there were other factors that shaped his personality and temperament. Belgium, where he was born and brought up, was known for its religious fervor. Not only was the Bulcke family steeped in religious love, but even the village that he was raised in had an age-old church of Virgin Mary that was built in the 13th century and was known for its artistry and miracles. From his very childhood, Father Bulcke would visit the church to serve at the altar. He would also enthusiastically participate in the huge procession of Virgin Mary organized annually in the village.
Yes, with respect to his religious beginnings, a particular instance is remarkable. The chief mother superintendent of the convent he studied in, Mother Gertrude, recognizing something special in little Bulcke, had said during his Holy Communion, "Pray to God for sainthood." Years later, when he passed his first-year engineering exam, she again told him, "Why do you work so hard? You are destined to become a saint."
His literary sensibilities also found a base in his early friendships and acquaintances. His family was friends with the men of letters and arts. One of them was Brother Alphonse, a novelist and musician. Another was Brahms, a painter. Thus, he had been introduced to literature and the arts from his very childhood, and its effect were clear in the literary giant that he would grow up to become.
Father Bulcke, as we know him, was a curious combination of strength and softness, elegance and simplicity, confidence and humility, and zeal and compassion. These traits in him were also nurtured in the ambience he was raised in. He was heavily influenced by the beauty, simplicity, earnestness, and warm-heartedness found in his village environment, and the sincere friendships he enjoyed with his childhood mates. The tendency of pioneering was seen in him from the very start. He established the first football team in his village with the assistance of his friends in the village. He also loved challenges. Dr. Dineshwar Prasad writes how Father Bulcke, in his boyhood, would ride his bicycle on the seashore in the direction opposite to the stormy winds.
Yes, his love for challenges is also evident in how he resolved to take up engineering studies, because in those days, the engineering entrance test was considered to be the toughest. Nobody, not even the family, had expected the 19-year-old Camille to qualify an exam as tough as this. However, not only did Father Bulcke pass the exam, he also topped it.
Yes, and this entry into the Louvain University to pursue engineering marked another significant phase in his life, his association with the Flemish movement. He eventually became one of the leading students participating in the movement. There was a clear linguistic and cultural hierarchy in those days in Belgium. It was evident that the French-speaking Belgians exploited the Flemish speakers. Not only did the arrogant French-speaking Belgians look down upon the Flemish tongue as uncultured and insignificant, but the Flemish elites who worshipped the French language and lifestyle also saw their own language and culture with disdain. So much so that such widespread contempt, not just from the Frenchmen, but also the aristocratic Flemish, caused the common Flemish masses to feel alienated and snubbed in their own country. Having been raised in a family that loved its mother tongue, Father Bulcke was strongly against the government's imposition of French over the Flemish public. This again was a stepping stone in his life for the stand that he was going to take all his life to protect and preserve mother tongues, not just his own, but also of the people of India.
Speaking of India, it is interesting how Father Bulcke was led to India, and that had its roots in his joining priesthood. One evening, when he was alone at home, focused on his exam preparations, reading a book, there was a flash of lightning on the page. And in that light, he just knew that he was destined for sainthood. He spent next hours crying because his vision and dreams of becoming an engineer had been broken by this sudden realization. However, he was calmed by the thought that this was God's call and he was in no position to turn it down.
Yes, I've also heard that even his parents, who had nurtured dreams of seeing his son as a prospering and successful engineer, were somewhat disconcerted by the news. But God-fearing as they were, they decided they were helpless before God's will and therefore accepted their son's decision to join priesthood.
मैंने कह दिया, आप दोनों से मुझे कुछ कहना है। मैंने शुरू किया, मैं इंजीनियर नहीं बनना चाहता हूँ। मैं संन्यास लेकर के कहीं विदेश में जाना चाहता हूँ। दूसरी सेवा, माँ मेरी कमरे में आई, मेरे पलंग पर बैठ गई और उन्होंने कह दिया, बेटा, अगर भगवान यही चाहता है, हम लोगों की भी है सौभाग्य है.
He was sent to Valkenburg in Holland, which was a center for religious studies for the Germans. Here, he did not just acquire expertise in Latin and Greek, but also learnt a great deal about the Christian religion and philosophy. He also learned German with such tenacity and dedication that he began to talk and write in German like native German. In fact, Father Bulcke's earliest works have been written in German. So, as I was talking about Father Bulcke's coming to India, in 1934, he had been offered two options, to either stay in his country and serve his religion, or to go abroad. He chose the latter option and expressed a wish to be sent to India for religious service. He had learnt about Father Levins of his province, that he has rendered valuable service to the tribal population in India, and was also told that there was still a lot needed to be done for them. He was informed that he would be sent to India sometime in 1935.
Upon his arrival in Ranchi, he was appointed as a mathematics teacher at St. Ignatius High School, Gumla. However, besides teaching mathematics, he also started taking lessons in Hindi. He felt that to serve the countrymen of India, he had to know their language. He was pained to witness the dominance enjoyed by English, a foreign tongue that had caused the people to neglect their already rich regional languages. He began to take Hindi lessons with his students in the school. Though he was more interested in Hindi prose, he was completely enthralled by Tulsidas's poetry. It was in Gumla that the seeds of Tulsi love were sown in Father Bulcke and made him an ardent devotee of Tulsidas.
In 1935, Bulcke travelled from Belgium to India.
In fact, the line from Tulsi's Ramcharitmanas, परहित सरिस धर्म नहीं भाई, पर पीड़ा सब नहीं अधमाई. There is no religion greater than doing good to others. There is no evil greater than causing harm to others, was probably what captivated and affected him to an extent that he dedicated his entire literary life to Tulsidas.
In 1935, Bulcke travelled from Belgium to India, where he arrived during the heyday of Indian national movement and right after the passage of the Government of India Act. He had only been a Jesuit for 5 years at the age of 26 when he fell in love with the nation, its citizens, and its language. Despite the national movement's efforts to abolish British colonial power, English proficiency was becoming more and more crucial. Indians and foreign missionaries alike chose English above native languages, while utilizing English to serve the colonial masters. Father Bulcke records that when he reached Ranchi in 1935, he was saddened by the fact that not only British rule India, but their language also have complete control over the mindset of Indians, just like the situation he saw in Belgium. He also took lessons in Hindi and Sanskrit from Pandit Badridat Shastri, HOD, Sanskrit Department, St. Columba College in Hazaribagh. Under his guidance, he learned Sanskrit in a methodological manner and grew fonder of Ramkatha and the ideals and values that the great text upholds. His unnatural commitment and diligence caused him to acquire such command over the language that he was able to analyze the Panchtantra, Valmiki's Ramayana, and Tulsidas's literature with perspicuity and ease. His comprehensive sense of language caused Shastriji to call him a Chalta Firta Shabdakosh. Once during his stay in Kasong, the eminent Indian independence activist, social reformer, and journalist Kaka Kalelkar attended a big gathering that was being presided over by Father Bulcke. Awed and impressed by Father Bulcke's speech delivered in Hindi, he had exclaimed, "Father Bulcke has become one of us." This remark instilled in him a fresh urge to take up higher studies in Hindi.
It is also said that Father Bulcke took offense on being addressed as a foreigner. He would not fail to remind people that he had been awarded the Indian citizenship in 1951. Once, in a Tulsi Jayanti ceremony observed by a prestigious organization in Ranchi, the master of the ceremony addressed Father Bulcke, the chief guest, as a Hindi Premi Videshi. In response to this, Father Bulcke, at the very beginning of his speech, said with great emphasis, "मुझे विदेशी मत कहो जी, मैं भी उतना ही भारतीय हूँ जितना आप या आप लोग हैं. Please do not call me a foreigner. I am as much Indian as you are."
With the passage of time, it was becoming increasingly clear that in order to win the hearts of the people of India, one would have to talk in their language. And to break the walls of religions, it was important to initiate conversations through Hindi. He had already made up his mind to take up higher studies in Hindi. Impressed by the literary ambience of Allahabad University, he was determined to pursue MA in Hindi from Allahabad. He wrote a letter to the head, Department of Hindi, Allahabad University, Dr. Dhirendra Verma, expressing his wish to pursue MA Hindi. However, he received no response. Therefore, he joined Calcutta University to take up BA in Sanskrit and thereafter left for Allahabad to get enrolled in the MA Hindi course. Dr. Dhirendra Verma, highly skeptical about a foreigner taking up masters in Hindi, sought to test Father Bulcke's linguistic and literary abilities by asking him to critically evaluate some excerpts from Vinay Patrika. He was so impressed by his performance that he happily granted him the permission to pursue the course.
During his stay in Allahabad, Father Bulcke had had the privilege to learn from some of the best scholars in the country. Dr. Ram Kumar Verma, Dr. Ram Shankar Shukla Rasal, Devi Prasad Shukla, and Miss Dr. Mata Prasad Gupt. Chief among his classmates were Dr. Dharmavir Bharti and Dr. Jagdish Gupt. He also became friends with Makhanlal Chaturvedi, Maithili Sharan Gupt, Sumitra Nandan Pant, and Mahadevi Verma. In fact, he regarded Mahadevi Verma as his older sister and forever addressed her fondly as Didi.
In 1947, upon completing his MA, he began working for his doctorate. The original plan was to work on the development of Ram Bhakti. But the matter that he had collected for the first chapter, that was the development of Ramkatha, was so vast and his inferences on it so interesting that Dr. Dhirendra Verma allowed him to edit his topic of study and narrow it down to the development of Ramkatha. In 1949, he was awarded a DPhil, and his thesis, Ramkatha, Utpatti aur Vikas, written under the guidance of Dr. Mata Prasad Gupt, was published by the Hindi Parishad of Allahabad University in 1950. Even after its publication, Dr. Bulcke continued his research on Ramkatha for about 18 more years. As a result, findings and analysis kept growing. He has included his findings on literatures on Ram found in ancient and modern Indian languages like Sanskrit, Pali, Prakrit, Hindi, Bangla, Tamil, but also in other Asian languages like Tibetan, Burmese, Indonesian, and Thai. His thesis thus showed how Ram is not confined to the borders of India, but transcends the boundaries and bears international relevance. This well-researched work on Ram Katha is rich, diverse, and has been scientifically executed. With its publication, Dr. Bulcke began to be counted among the most eminent scholars of Hindi and Indian studies.
What is all the more remarkable about Father Bulcke's thesis on Ram Katha is that it happens to be the first thesis on Hindi written in Hindi. At this time, when Father Bulcke was pursuing his research in Allahabad, it was a rule that all research work across subjects could be presented only in English. It would have been quite easy for Father Bulcke to write his work in English, but since it went against his principles and his determination to work towards the revival and upliftment of Hindi, he requested that his research be permitted to be published in Hindi. The then Vice-Chancellor of Allahabad University, Dr. Amarnath Jha, ordered for some modifications in the rules and granted Dr. Father Bulcke permission to present his thesis in Hindi. This encouraged other research scholars to follow suit and present their thesis in other modern Indian languages.
In 1950, Dr. Bulcke was appointed as the head, Department of Hindi, St. Xavier's College, Ranchi, and he permanently shifted to Manresa House, Ranchi. He started the Hindi and Sanskrit Department of St. Xavier's College, Ranchi, and transformed the adjacent residential complex of Jesuits, the Manresa House, into a hub of intellectual activities. For the next 10 years or so, he spent his time teaching and preparing for classes. He would engage students in intermediate as well as BA honors, teaching them Hindi as well as Sanskrit. He would teach Ayodhya Kand to BA Hindi students. However, he soon realized that the students were more interested in passing their examinations than bearing any genuine love and enthusiasm for the subject. Disappointed by the realization, he began to lose interest in teaching and decided to devote his entire time to research and service of Hindi. The Jesuit Society granted him the permission to pursue his goals on the condition that he continued to function as the head of the Department of Hindi.
There was a lending library that Father Bulcke maintained at Manresa House. Students would flock to the library that contained the rarest of books. His generosity was remembered by many to whom he lent books from his personal library even though they were strangers. Even female students who were not allowed into classes in St. Xavier's College during the 1960s could access his library and receive his mentorship. Father would lend books freely, encouraging more and more students to read and to read more and more. He would guide the students on what to read, where to find the book, and would with great enthusiasm search the books for the students and encourage them to read and take notes. My father, Dr. Kamal Kumar Bose, who has served as head Department of Hindi, St. Xavier's College, Ranchi, had the privilege to have Father Bulcke as a teacher and mentor. He fondly remembers certain episodes involving Dr. Father Bulcke. Once, he had gone to the library without a pen, and though he wanted to take notes, he was hesitant to say anything to Father Bulcke. Father noticed, understood, and lent him a pen. He did not take it back when my father offered to return it. He just said, "It is as important to write as much as it is to read." My father still treasures the invaluable pen as a symbol of his love and blessing.
Father would say, "तितली नहीं मधुमक्खी बनो." पुस्तक को तितली की तरह छूकर नहीं छोड़ना चाहिए, बल्कि मधुमक्खी की तरह उनसे सार ग्रहण करना चाहिए. This means one should not be like a butterfly that simply touches the skin. One should instead be a honeybee that sucks the nectar out of the flower. He was against any kind of half-heartedness and ambiguity in the pursuit of knowledge. His lifelong research on Ram Katha instilled in him an everlasting and ever-growing love and devotion for Tulsidas. When someone asked him whom he would like to meet in heaven, his immediate response was Tulsidas. He was known to keep a copy of the Bible and the Ramcharitmanas at the head of his bed when he lay down. Once addressing a gathering on Tulsi Jayanti in Chaibasa, Father Bulcke addressed the crowd as fellow Tulsi lovers, and then went on to say that I am not a Ram Bhakt but a Tulsi Bhakt. After death, if I find a place in heaven, I would touch feet of my parents and then Goswami Tulsidas. He considered bhakti as a noble path which is accessible to everyone.
मैंने 37 में साल भर हिंदी और तुलसीदास का रामचरितमानस पूरा पढ़ लिया और उसी समय से मैं तुलसी का भक्त बन गया हूँ। ये भी एक संयोग की बात है। मैं लिखना चाहता था तुलसी की राम भक्ति। उसका भूमिका थी राम कथा। पहला भाग राम भक्ति, दूसरा भाग तुलसी की राम भक्ति, क्योंकि तुलसी की राम भक्ति दूसरी राम भक्ति से बहुत अधिक, इसमें बहुत अधिक अंतर है।
Father Bulcke was of the opinion that when I think about my life, I realize that Jesus, Hindi, and Goswami Tulsidas are three integral components of my spiritual development. And according to me, there is no struggle or tension between these three, but a very harmonious blend of three very diverse and important cultures and thought processes. Whenever these three meet, I do not find any struggle between knowledge and faith. He was also of the opinion that material comforts are incapable of solving the problems of modern society. He said, religious faith is beyond the field of discussion. He wrote several significant essays on Tulsi, and after completing his translation of the Bible, he wanted to write a comprehensive epic on Tulsidas. Though this dream was not realized, his intense love for Tulsi is evident in his essays and works like Ram Katha or Tulsidas and Manas Kaumudi. For his services to Hindi literature and education, he was awarded the Padma Bhushan by the Government of India in 1974.
Though he was a multilinguist, well-versed in Flemish, English, French, German, Latin, Greek, Sanskrit as well as Hindi, he had accepted Hindi as the language of his mind and body, heart and soul. For years together, he kept working relentlessly in the service of Hindi and would take the help of other languages only when it served his original and sole purpose of the upliftment and growth of Hindi. He earnestly believed that all areas of knowledge and science could find an appropriate expression in Hindi, and the dependence on English for academic purposes was baseless. My father remembers how Father Bulcke would speak in Hindi only in Hindi and in an unadulterated Hindi. He expected the same from his students. Once, when my father stood by his room seeking permission to enter with the words, "May I come in, Father?" Father Bulcke, displeased, looking at him from top to toe, asked, "हिंदी में ऐसे शब्दों का विकल्प नहीं है क्या? हिंदी ऐसी गरीबनी तो नहीं?" He would call Sanskrit Maharani, Hindi Bharat ki Patrani, and English Nokrani. He had high hopes for Hindi and believed that in near future, Hindi would become the major, the most respected and the most used language in India.
Yes, that is the reason he started to work on putting together a dictionary to facilitate and promote Hindi learning for non-Hindi speakers. The first outcome of this mission was called a Technical English-Hindi Glossary. His English-Hindi dictionary, which is known as Angrezi Hindi Kosh, was published in 1968. What makes it one of the best dictionaries is the inclusion of the pronunciation of the word, its grammatical positioning, its exact meaning, and the possible usages.
मैंने अनुवाद करते समय इसका ध्यान रखा, तो इसलिए मेरा सबसे पहला उद्देश्य यह था सरल स्वाभाविक हिंदी लेकिन व्याकरण के अनुसार.
He was very particular about the cultural backdrop of India while writing the dictionary. Recalling his interaction with Father Bulcke, renowned scholar Dr. Ashok Priyadarshi noted in a memoir that when asked about the reason behind giving the same meaning to two different English words, drawing room and parlour, Father Bulcke said that our country India is poor. Only a handful of houses might have drawing room as well as a parlour. This seminal work is now used as the official dictionary in central as well as state offices. When Hindi was the official language in Bihar and Jharkhand's government agencies, this specific dictionary quickly gained enormous popularity. In fact, the Bulcke dictionary could be found prominently displayed on a shelf in almost every middle-class home in Bihar at that time.
He had also attempted a number of translations. The biggest project in this respect that he took up was the translation of the Old Testament from Latin to Hindi and that of the New Testament from Greek to Hindi. He was able to complete his translation of the New Testament, but his work on the Old Testament remains unfinished owing to his demise. He would say, New Testament का अनुवाद कर चुका हूँ जी, Old Testament का अनुवाद करना चाहता हूँ, मरने से पहले कुछ करना चाहता हूँ जी. I have already translated the New Testament and wish to translate the Old Testament before I die.
Father Bulcke left for his heavenly abode on 17th of August 1982. In a state where religious conversion has always been a highly sensitive and contentious issue and anti-conversion laws have been introduced by the government, people of all religions attended the ceremonial reburial of Father Bulcke's remains to mark his final resting place, Karmabhumi, Jharkhand, 35 years after his death. Speakers at the commemoration included Father Bulcke's close associates, noted personalities from the field of literature, former students, and members of the Jesuit Society who reflected on his life and contributions, which included not just original commentaries on religious texts, but high-quality translations and arguably the best English to Hindi Shabdakosh, still found in most Indian homes and offices. Others gave him appellation of Bhumiputra to honor his connection to Jharkhand, and several during the ceremony referred to him as more Indian than Indian. Sanskrit bhajans, dohas and chaupais from Ramcharitmanas were read aloud throughout the prayers by Christian clergy and was incredibly poignant to witness. In casual conversations, people also discussed the striking parallels between Father Bulcke, now also known as Baba Bulcke, and his spiritual hero Goswami Tulsidas. The Bible and the Ramayana both attempted to translate the wisdom of religious texts into the common people's languages of Awadhi and Hindi. Both made the central principles of humanism the focus of their retellings of the texts, emphasizing that the messages they contained were more important than the stories themselves. They also both thought that Bhakti Yoga was superior to Jnana Yoga, and both experienced excruciating physical pain as they neared death.
Indeed, Dr. Father Camille Bulcke was an institution in himself. The word Kamil in Hindi translates as complete, and the name justifies the personality and works of this great devotee of Hindi. Father Bulcke indeed was a complete man, a paragon of virtue, love and devotion. He was a man of words, letters and languages. He was a man of integrity and goodwill. Father Bulcke's life is synonymous with dedication, devotion and a relentless service to the marginalized and the downtrodden. Ranchi has been privileged to have had such a long and close association with Father Bulcke. We as Xavierians are proud to be a part of an institution that has been formed in so many ways by a stalwart like Father Bulcke. His love for our country and its culture, especially at a time when Indians had been brainwashed against their own culture and heritage, served as a blessing and gave our countrymen a glimpse of our rich and diverse legacy. Father Bulcke continues to live through Hindi. He continues to inspire us. He continues to fill us with pride. He continues to give us glory.
इस कोश की इतने लोकप्रियता था, उसका नाम था अंग्रेजी हिंदी ग्लोसरी. तो इसलिए बाद में मैंने सोचा अगर ये सच है तो मैं एक पूरा कोश बनाऊंगा. लेकिन कोश बनाने के लिए इतनी तकलीफ हुई, 5,000 घंटे लग गए. तो मुझको एक कविता याद आई, डच कविता. उसमें लिखा है, अगर कोई न्यायाधीश किसी को बहुत सख्त सजा दिलवाना चाहते हैं तो उसको कालकोठरी में नहीं भेज दें, बिगाड़ कराना नहीं, उससे कहें कि कोश का निर्माण करें.
You were listening to our eminential dialogue entitled In Hindi Service, Father Camille Bulcke. In commemoration of Hindi Divas, which is observed every year on 14th September, the participants were Professor Ananya Bose, Assistant Professor, Department of English, St. Xavier's College, Ranchi, and Professor Sachindranath Mishra, Assistant Professor, Department of English, St. Xavier's College, Ranchi. Conceptualized and researched by Naveen K. Gupta of All India Radio Delhi, this program was produced and presented by Manoj Kumar of All India Radio Ranchi and came to you from the Delhi station of All India Radio.